What can one girl do? That's the opening ensemble cry, the question captains and soldiers, royalty and clergy, the desperate, the homeless, the starving peasants are all asking in a new work, born to do this, the Joan of Arc rock opera. What can one girl do? In the past 5 years, I've learned and have witnessed confirmation that one ordinary girl can do the most extraordinary things through faith. Well, nearly 5 years ago, having written a couple of large-scale musicals in my career, I was looking for my next special project. Some of you may know when I'm not serving as a chalice bearer here on the altar at St. John's, I'm working as the founder and artistic director of the company theater. So truly, out of somewhere, nowhere, a thought came in my head. Joan of Arc, write about Joan. And immediately I began to research and approach two incredible people to collaborate with me. Rock musicals happen to be my favorite theatrical genre. Who doesn't love Jesus Christ Superstar? And after 5 years, with a brilliant composer and collaborator by my side, when here, they were helping me through this journey, here we are, live on stage in July and August. But most of you are familiar with the Lenten online game Lent Madness. It was masterminded by our former rector, Father Tim. Well, for a few years ago, Joan, at my suggestion, of course, was one of the proposed saints who could win the golden halo. I was excited. I was 2 years into my research, and I thought, yes, Joan will win. I will have swag like a coffee mug that I can bring into, rehearsal with me with her halo, and I'll have it even before this thing is finished. But I was wrong. She didn't even make the final 8. And then the online complaint about her that I most remember was, she was a warrior. How is that good in any capacity? To advocate fighting and killing. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a brilliant theologian who was known for his kindness. He took a great risk to involve himself in a plot to assassinate Hitler. But he is considered a modern-day saint and a Golden Halo winner. Does the difference lie in the gender? Now here's the dilemma. Almost everyone knows how Joan of Arc died, but how many people know how she lived? Joan was born into a war-torn France. 80 years of violence and destruction preceded her birth. As a child, she bore witness to horrific attacks on her village. The fields that sustained them were charred to the ground. Cows were so thin and starving, they weren't even worth slaughtering. Women were being abused. Children were being stolen away in cages. And the village church, where her devout mother spent so many hours, was set on fire. These were ordinary people, and so was Joan. But when the Archangel Michael appeared to her, she didn't deny it. And when he called her, she listened. She was a child, a mere 11-year-old child, but she listened. She saw a figure surrounded by a great light, and she listened. Now, some people like to theorize that Joan was mentally ill. She heard voices telling her that it was not only okay, it was necessary to do as she so desperately wanted to do, to believe in herself, which meant defying all society's norms. She cut her hair. She wore men's clothes. She defied her parents and ran away from home. All of these things were unheard of. And on top of it all, she was a girl who fiercely believed in God, and God told her to believe in herself. Did people say Moses was mentally ill when he came down from a mountain and announced that God talked to him through a bush that was on fire? Does the difference in believing lie in the gender of the person reporting the phenomenon? After all, in Moses' time, women were just property. In Joan's time, unless you were royalty, women were just property. Jesus first appeared from the tomb not to Pharisees, not to male disciples, but to Mary Magdalene. It's okay to believe a woman. It took centuries until women were even respected enough to get to do things like vote. It was in my lifetime that women couldn't buy property or get a bank loan without a man's signature. It is a divine miracle that I was able to obtain the building that is now the company theater. Women were not considered reliable business people in the early 90s. Especially women in theater. Especially a gay woman. An ordinary girl from the 15th century who achieves extraordinary things. At age 16, Joan, who'd never been more than a few miles away from her village, defied her parents, ran away from home by stealing away on the back of a cart. She had cut her hair, donned her brother's clothing, and went to see a captain whom she convinced to give her a horse and several knights to travel with her to Chinon. There, the Dauphin, who was the prince at the time, was in hiding from this constantly raging war. He had no interest in it and was definitely not wanting to participate. And at this time, France had no leader, no king. She then proceeded to ride over 100 miles. She'd never even been on a horse. She convinced the Dauphin to give her an army that she captained like a seasoned warrior and led 5,000 men into a victory over a vicious siege that had raged on for months. She returned to the Dauphin and made sure he was crowned King of France. After more victories, Joan and her army were returning to take back Paris. Here, she was finally captured. She was held in a castle before it was decided what to do with her. A duchess, who was most enamored of Joan and her undeniable spirit, offered her fine dresses in this incarcerated time before she was actually held in a dungeon and tried. But she wanted none of it. She declared, she said, she dared to not only fight and lead an army, she dared to be herself. With God, I am not afraid. I will dare and dare and dare until I die. Look at the success of Hamilton. It's beautiful the way young people and old alike have become passionate about a piece of history. With Joan, if you take the time to know her, you may also become fascinated not only with history, but with mystery. Sacred mystery, that's a whole other level to her story. It's something we experience as we take communion. It's a sacred mystery. Joan insisted that before each battle, all 5,000 of her men had the opportunity to receive communion. She also wept and prayed over the dead soldiers on both sides. During her 5-month imprisonment, she repeatedly asked for communion, which was always denied. Joan had one opportunity to save herself. The agreement was to never wear men's clothes and remain imprisoned with only bread and water. But she desperately wanted the bread of life. Joan declined and was put to death a martyr, and at her death, "We have killed a saint," was the outcry. A saint. But what is a saint? Joan had visions. She saved people. She was part of a centuries-long prophecy. She was brilliant at war strategies, and yet she was an illiterate peasant, unable to write anything beyond her name. She didn't even know how to use a fork. I believe when an ordinary person like Joan does an extraordinary thing and sacrifices their life or is willing to, that is my understanding of a saint. Can we be like Joan? Now, I don't offhand know any 17-year-old girls who could lead an army with strategic brilliance, I'll say that, but then I think of Greta Thurman and I believe, yes, a child can be a leader. I don't know who goes around saying, "In his name I will dare and dare and dare until I die," but first responders and some of the early COVID care workers, people in the military, they find themselves in horrifying situation. They take a risk. It may be life-threatening. They have faith. Heroes are among us, and maybe you can think of a time when you could say, "Today, I was Joan." Often it's difficult to do what's right in the face of wrong, but at your own risk, you speak out. You stop a situation. You think, "Today, I am Joan." A friend makes a racist comment. You don't let it pass by. You speak out. "Today, I am Joan." You don't feel comfortable when a person of color is pulled over. You watch with your phone ready. "Today, I am Joan." You see a child or maybe even an adult being bullied. You speak out. You stop it. "Today, I am Joan." Joan of Arc was executed, burned at the stake for wearing men's clothing. Until that final moment of her death, she held on to her faith. So I hope this entices you to come and see this celebration, this contemporary rock opera that tells her story in a way that is passionate, sometimes fun, and for sure, faith-driven. 600 years later, and women still need a voice. And that's what one girl can do.